The Carthuan palace was a place of overwhelming grandeur. Its walls rose like living crystal, refracting sunlight into dazzling cascades of color that danced across the marble floors. Every step taken within those halls echoed with the weight of centuries of conquest and tradition. It was not a place for outsiders, and certainly not for humans yet that day. A lone Terran stood in its center, surrounded by the watchful eyes of an alien court commander. Elias Vey had been chosen to represent Earth in the negotiations. He wasn't the most decorated soldier, nor the most polished diplomat, but the Terran Republic had selected him for a reason. He was a man who could stand in the presence of giants and not bow, and giants were precisely what surrounded him. The Carthuan nobility towered over him, their elongated frames clad in ceremonial armor that shimmered gold and obsidian. Each noble's posture exuded superiority. Their thin, angular faces twisted with disdain at the sight of the small, rugged human. To them, Elias was a curiosity, an ape from a death world, somehow dragged into the affairs of civilizations that ruled the stars for millennia. The murmurs around the chamber were sharp and unkind. Why does the sovereign tolerate this primitive? Look at him, scarred, brutish, hardly worthy of notice. Let him speak and be gone. He does not belong here. Elias ignored them. He had heard worse insults from enemies who later lay defeated at his feet. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a throne carved of living crystal, stood Princess Valera, daughter of the High Sovereign Heir to the Carthuan throne. And if the whispers of the galaxy were to be believed, one of the most formidable minds of her generation. She was not armored like the nobles, yet her presence outshone them all. Her skin carried the faint glow of bioluminescence, her silver eyes like twin stars that seemed to reflect the very core of a person's soul. Her crown was a circlet of living vines, gently pulsing with alien light. She did not move as the human approached. She only studied him with a calmness that felt predatory. Elias had expected arrogance. He had expected disinterest. What he had not expected was the sheer intensity of her gaze. He met her eyes, and the hall fell silent. It was a simple act, almost laughably so yet in the Carthuan culture. To meet the princess's eyes directly was an audacity few dared. Their traditions demanded deference, demanded lowered heads and bowed spines. Yet this human, this outsider, this ape, looked at her as though she were not untouchable royalty, but an equal. The nobles hissed and muttered. A few even stepped forward in outrage, ready to demand his execution for the insult. But Valera raised a hand, silencing them all without a word. Her gaze never wavered. His did not either. In that silence, a battle of wills took place, no weapons drawn. No words exchanged, just the raw clash of spirit against spirit. Elias could feel the weight of her authority pressing against him, the unspoken command to yield. But humans were a strange breed. Yielding was never their first instinct. The air seemed heavier, the moments stretching until it was almost unbearable. Then, at last, the princess spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried across the hall with the cutting clarity of a blade. "If you feel something," she said. Her tone sharp and deliberate. "Prove it." Human. The words struck the court like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted. What was she saying? What did she mean? No suitor, no warrior. No noble of their people had ever been addressed in such a way. But Elias understood it wasn't about politics. It wasn't about the ceremony. She had seen something in him, some spark of defiance, some echo of the raw, untamed fire that humans carried within them. And she demanded more. Elias allowed a small, steady grin to cross his face. He didn't bow. He didn't flinch. He simply answered her gaze with the same unbreakable steel around them. The Carthuan nobles could not comprehend what they had just witnessed. To them, it was an outrage. To Valera, it was a challenge given and a challenge accepted. And to Elias, It was the beginning of something far greater than negotiations. A bond had been sparked in that moment, not of affection yet, but of recognition. A princess who had never been tested had just found someone willing to try. And that spark, unnoticed by most, was DTHE Palace Gardens of Carthuan, were unlike anything HFY had ever seen. Towering crystal trees twisted toward the sky, their branches humming softly as if they sang to the twin suns. The air shimmered with motes of bioluminescent pollen, drifting lazily like stars torn from the heavens. Predatory plants lay hidden among the beauty, their petals sharp as blades, waiting for the unwary to stumble too close. This was no serene retreat. This was a crucible. Elias understood the moment he stepped past the gilded archways that this was not a casual invitation. Princess Valera had summoned him here for a reason. She stood waiting at the garden's heart, dressed not in regal silks, but in the armor of her warrior caste. It was elegant and terrifying all at once, polished black plates traced with veins of glowing silver. A ceremonial spear strapped to her back, her silver eyes fixed on him with the same intensity as before. Yet now there was something sharper in them. Expectation. "You dared return my gaze yesterday," she said, circling him slowly. Her voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of challenge. Few have ever shown such boldness. Courage is rare among my people, but courage alone is only a empty. I want proof. Show me that you are more than a bold ape who stumbled into my father's court. Elias tilted his head, lips quirking into the kind of half-smile that had gotten him into trouble more times than he could count. Careful, princess. When a human proves something, we don't hold back. For a moment, her lips curved ever so slightly, as if she found the idea amusing, even refreshing. Then her expression hardened again. Good, then I will not either. And so the trials began. First, she led him deeper into the gardens where the paths narrowed into razor-sharp crystal thickets. The ground pulsed faintly beneath their boots, alive with the presence of predators. From the shadows, sleek reptilian beasts with translucent hides, slithered eyes glinting with hunger. Valera moved like flowing water, her spear flashing with precision. Elias had no spear, only his compact kinetic pistol and a combat knife strapped to his thigh. "Stay close if you value your life," she said as one of the beasts lunged. Elias's response was a shot that cracked the silence, the creature collapsing mid-leap with a hole through its skull. He gave her a grin. "I'll manage." They pressed on. At every step, she tested him. She wove ancient riddles into their path, riddles meant to trap the mind in spirals of logic. Nobles before him had failed, stammering under her questioning. Elias, however, had grown up on Earth, where survival demanded creativity, not blind adherence to rules. He bent her riddles in ways she hadn't expected, breaking them apart and stitching together solutions no Carthuan mind would have considered. Her eyes narrowed not in anger, but in intrigue. Then came the trial of endurance. She led him across crystalline ridges, demanding leaps from impossible heights. Climbs up razor-edged surfaces, dodges through vines that snapped shut like bear traps. Elias tore his palms open, sweat stinging his cuts, but he refused to slow. When a vine nearly caught his leg, he severed it with his knife and laughed as if the danger were nothing but another soldier's drill. Hours passed. The suns shifted overhead. Still, neither relented. At last, they emerged into the labyrinth's heart, a clearing where the air shimmered with strange energy. Valera halted, her chest rising and falling with exertion. Sweat traced silver lines down her glowing skin, catching the twin suns' light. For the first time, she regarded him not as an intruder, not as a curiosity, but as something far rarer. "Strange," she murmured, her spear resting loosely in her hand. "Every suitor before you bent, begged, or broke. But you." Elias wiped blood from a fresh cut on his cheek. He met her gaze without hesitation, grinning through exhaustion. "We humans don't break easy, Princess. You wanted proof I'm just getting started." Her silver eyes softened for the briefest moment, something dangerous flickering within them. A spark, a crack in the perfect wall of royal discipline. It was not admiration, not yet. But it was recognition, and as the sun dipped lower, casting the garden in hues of violet and fire, Princess Valera realized what she had found, a creature unlike any she had ever met. A human who could match her trials, who did not falter under her stare, who treated danger as if it were a friend. For the first time in years, she felt anticipation burn within her. This human might just be the proof she had demanded. The galaxy was rarely still. Beyond the shimmering walls of the Carthuan palace, stars burned and empires plotted. The trials in the garden had proven Elias's resolve to Princess Valera. But destiny was not content to leave it there. The news arrived in the form of trembling messengers. The Dravari had returned. They were not newcomers to the galactic stage. The Dravari were an ancient enemy, their ships built from the calcified remains of dead titans, their fleets like swarms of ivory locusts. They advanced not for territory, not for resources, but for domination. Entire colonies had already fallen. Refugees whispered of burning skies and worlds stripped to their bones. The Carthuan nobility panicked. In the High Council chamber, generals argued, their voices rising in frustration. Some demanded immediate defense of the border. Others called for retreat to consolidate their forces. But above all, there was fear that the Dravari would do what they had always done, overwhelm, consume, and leave nothing behind. Elias listened in silence as the nobles bickered. He stood at the edge of the chamber, dismissed by most as little more than a curiosity. After all, what could a human untested, primitive outsider know of interstellar war? But one voice silenced the room. Princess Valera rose from her throne, her silver eyes hard as crystal. "Enough," she said, her tone carrying the force of command. "The Dravari are not stopped by arguments. They are stopped by action." She turned her gaze to Elias, and the court collectively stiffened. "The human fights with me." The outcry was immediate. Nobles spat protests. Generals slammed their fists against the table. "Outrageous," one hissed. "A Terran has no place among our war council. He is untested," another barked. "This is no game for him to prove himself." But Valera did not waver. "He has proven himself already. More than you know. His mind cuts where yours dull. His will does not falter. You dismiss him because he is not of our kind. I elevate him because he is exactly what we need." And with that, Elias Vey was seated among the war council of one of the galaxy's oldest empires. The first sessions were chaos. The Carthuan generals mapped their fleets into rigid formations, their strategies steeped in honor and ceremony. They spoke of valorous engagements, of direct confrontations to uphold tradition. To them, war was not just survival, it was theater, a performance of strength before the galaxy's eyes. Elias could stomach it no longer. He stood, slamming his palm against the holographic map. "You're thinking like rulers," he said, "not survivors. You're planning battles to look noble while the Dravari burn your worlds to ash." The generals bristled. "And what would you have us do, human?" One sneered. Elias's eyes narrowed. When he began to redraw the map, where they placed fleets in neat lines, he shattered them into scattered cells. Where they planned glorious defenses, he marked ambush points in asteroid belts and nebulae. Where they hoped to meet the Dravari head-on, he proposed hit-and-run strikes that would bleed the enemy dry before they could even reach Carthuan space, steal their signals, lure them into traps, make them chase shadows until they don't know where the real fight is. His voice was hard, each word a lesson born of humanity's long history of brutal wars. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. That's why humanity still stands on a world that should have killed us long before we reached the stars. The council chamber was thick with tension. Most of the nobles looked horrified, even disgusted. But Valera leaned forward, her silver eyes alight with something fierce. Unorthodox, she murmured. Dishonorable, some would say, but effective. And when the Dravari Armada struck, Elias's plans became reality. The first battles shocked the galaxy. Dravari fleets advanced with confidence, only to be shredded by Carthone ships lying in wait among asteroid fields. Enemy warbands charged into seemingly vulnerable colonies, only to be cut down when hidden strike teams ambushed them from behind. Entire flotillas were trapped in narrow nebula corridors and annihilated. Before they realized they had been lured there, whispers spread across the stars. The Dravari, long thought unstoppable, were bleeding. And in the shadows of these victories was the name that began to pass from mouth to mouth. Human Dot to the Carthuan soldiers who fought under his strategies. Elias Vey became something strange and awe-inspiring, a warrior who saw the battlefield not as a place of honor but as a puzzle to be broken, a challenge to be overcome at any cost. To the Dravari, he became something worse, a terror. An unpredictable mind that turned their power against them, and through it all, Princess Valera never looked away from him. In every council, in every battlefield report, her eyes found his. His proof was no longer just defiance in a throne room or trials in a garden. His proof was written in the fire of war. In the victories carved from impossible odds, the Dravari had come expecting an empire ready to crumble. What they found instead was a new kind of resistance, one born not from tradition, but from the unyielding will of humanity, and Elias Vey was only just beginning. War had a way of burning away illusions. The first Dravari assaults had been repelled, thanks in no small part to Elias's brutal strategies. Carthuan fleets, once rigid and ceremonial, now struck like predators. They ambushed, harried, and cut deep, leaving enemy ships adrift and shattered. Victories were won, but at a cost. The stars themselves seemed to weep fire as wreckage drifted endlessly through void. Elias had grown used to that sight long ago. Humanity had bled through countless wars on Earth before it ever reached the stars. But to the Carthuanan ancient people bound by honor, the wreckage was a haunting reminder that their traditions no longer shielded them. And through every battle, Elias stood at Valera's side. He had proven his worth on the council table. Now he proved it in fire and blood, wherever she fought. He fought to his rifle, spitting iron and lead, while her spear cut arcs of silver light through the chaos. Something grew between them in that furnace. It was not the easy affection of chance companions. It was not courtly romance wrapped in silks and whispered words. It was forged in exhaustion, sharpened by shared danger, tempered by victories won when death had seemed certain. They became more than allies. They became each other's certainty. One night, after a grueling battle over the shattered moon of Velkar, the two stood apart from the soldiers, away from the endless reports of losses and casualties. The world below smoldered, its crust cracked from bombardment, its cities still burning. Above them, the night sky glittered with wrecks. Valera stood at the cliff's edge, armor still scorched from the fighting, her silver eyes reflecting the flames below. Elias approached quietly, his own body aching with wounds he hadn't yet treated. He didn't speak at first. Neither did she. At last she asked, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "You bleed for my people, Elias Vey. Not for glory. Not for power. Tell me why." Elias looked out over the burning ruins. His jaw clenched. "Because when I looked into your eyes in that throne room, I felt something. And when you told me to prove it," he gave a weary chuckle, I realized I already wanted to. Not for Earth, not for politics. For you? Valera turned sharply, her gaze piercing his. The words of humans were often bold, but rarely did they carry such weight. She studied him as though searching for deception, for weakness. Instead, she found only truth. "You are dangerous, Elias Vey," she whispered. "Not because of your weapons, because of what you make me feel." For a long moment, the world seemed to narrow to the two of them, a lone human and alien. Soldier and princess, predator and prey of a strange new bond neither fully understood. Her hand, armored but delicate, brushed against his cheek where a cut had bled. He didn't move away. But before either could say more, the peace shattered. Sirens split the night, urgent and shrill. The command network lit up with frantic transmissions. Scouts had sighted the Dravari flagship entering orbit. Not a raiding force, not a probing attack, the flagship. The fortress ship was a legend, even among the galaxy's oldest powers. A monstrous vessel of bone and plasma, said to carry enough firepower to scour entire worlds in hours. It was not here to test Carthuan defenses. It was here to end the war in one decisive strike. Soldiers scrambled to positions. Generals barked orders, their voices cracking under the weight of dread. Even the most seasoned warriors paled at the thought of facing the flagship head-on. Valera straightened, her silver eyes burning with defiance. She turned to Elias, and in that moment there was no hesitation in her voice. "The final battle is here. If we fall, Carthuan falls. The galaxy will remember nothing but ashes." Elias checked his rifle, the familiar weight grounding him. He met her gaze with the same unyielding fire he had shown the first time they locked eyes. "Then we don't fall. You wanted proof, princess? You'll have it. All of it." The night air trembled with distant thunder as the flagship descended, blotting out the stars. And in the shadow of that Leviathan, standing side by side, Elias and Valera prepared for a fight that would decide not just the fate of a world, but the destiny of two peoples and the bond between them. The trials in the gardens had been just the beginning. The true proof would come now, in fire and fury. The chamber that had once been the center of judgment was now filled with the sound of silence. Every noble, every soldier, every diplomat of the Vairi Empire stared at the human who had dared defy both blade and crown. John stood with his chest heaving, a single crimson line running down his arm where the champion's blade had grazed him. Beside him, Princess Serenia still held his hand, her own pulse racing, though her face remained unreadable. The duel was over. The human had won. But winning a fight was not the same as proving worth, at least not in the Vairi court. The nobles began to murmur, their tones sharp with discontent. He bested a warrior. But strength alone does not bind empires. A duel proves nothing. Our line does not bend for outsiders. This cannot stand. The chorus rose, a tide of disapproval threatening to wash away everything John had gained. Serenia tightened her grip on his hand, but her voice was calm when she spoke. Enough. The chamber froze. No noble dared continue when the princess gave a command in that tone. Her eyes shifted back to John, burning with intensity. He remembered her words from days before, when she had looked at him and whispered, "If you feel something, prove it, human." He had proven it with steel, but now, he realized, something deeper was being asked of him. This was not a battle of blades. It was a battle of trust. Of hearts, John took a deep breath and turned from Serenia to the court. "You doubt me because I am human, because I am not of your stars. But you asked me to prove myself, and I will not do it with words or weapons alone." He reached into his pocket, drawing out something small, rough, and insignificant in the eyes of the alien nobles, a single seed encased in a hardened shell. The murmur of the court grew puzzled. A trinket. This is his proof. John ignored them. He knelt down, pressing the seed into a patch of soil contained in a ceremonial planter that decorated the chamber. He poured a small vial of water from his belt, something he carried always, more for comfort than necessity. He covered the seed gently, his hand steady despite the weight of countless eyes on him. This is what it means to be human. He said softly, but his voice carried. We do not just conquer, we plant. We nurture. We take the most fragile thing in the universe and we give it a chance to grow. That is strength. That is proof. The room was utterly still. He rose and looked directly into Saranya's eyes. I cannot promise to win every battle for you. I cannot promise I'll never fail. But I can promise this: so long as I live, I will fight for the chance for us to grow, just as this seed will. That is my proof. Not just to you, princess, but to every soul here. The silence stretched for long moments, until finally Saranya spoke. Her voice was quiet. Yet it carried the weight of 1,000 years of monarchy. You asked me to show you something, John, and you have. Not just power, not just courage, but something greater: hope. She turned to the court, her chin lifted high, her expression unyielding. This human has done what none of you dared. He has bled for me. He has faced death for me. And now he has offered not conquest, but growth. If you cannot see the strength in that, then you are blind. The nobles shifted uneasily. Some scoffed. Others lowered their gazes. But none spoke against her. John felt a strange warmth in his chest as Saranya turned back to him. She stepped closer, raising her hand, and for the first time in front of her entire court, she placed her palm against his cheek. The gesture was more binding than any crown. It's more dangerous than any sword. You have proven yourself human, she whispered, her voice meant for him alone. Not just to me, but to an empire. And in that moment, as their foreheads touched briefly in the old Vyari gesture of unity, John knew. He had crossed the gulf between worlds. He had faced challenge, blood, and doubt. And still, the princess who had once challenged him to show what he felt now stood beside him, not as royalty above him, but as his equal. The court did not cheer. They did not kneel. But they did not resist. And sometimes, in empires, silence was the loudest victory of all.